friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. By now you probably watched video number 1 on building this mandolin. If you haven't, I'll put a link in the description. Be sure to watch video number 1. It's called the intro. And in that video, for the most part, what I did was just rough out these two plates. There we have the top plate and the bottom plate. The top plate is Adirondack spruce. It's fine grain quarter sawed. Quarter sawed, for most, if you don't know what that means, pretty much means that the grain just goes straight up and down through the wood. Let me explain what quarter sawed means, at least the way I think of it. If you took a pie and you made very, very thin slices down, in the pie, just like a normal slice of a pie, but yet we're talking real thin slices. Now you take and picture a log set up on end, just like the round end of a pie. Now you slice all the way down through that thick log, just like you were slicing a pie. Now the difference is when you take those two outside edges of that piece of pie, or in this case wood, and you open them up and you bump them together. Now the grain on this side of the wood and the grain on this side of the wood matches. And so that's what they call book matched. And that's what this is. And that's why I started in video number 1 with wedge-shaped pieces of wood. One of the questions was, why are those pieces of wood wedge-shaped? Well, that's because they are cut out of a tree, just like I'm describing to you. And so therefore, it's going to be very small in the center and very wide at the outside edge. You take those outside edges, put them together, and you have matching grain on each side. The same way with the curly maple. And once again, I see the lines on the video screen because this is so curly. But anyway, that's where we're at right now. So then I plane them down to a certain thickness, and the thickness is the thickness that I got from a 1924 Lloyd Loar that I took apart. That Lloyd Loar is considered to be one of the very best Lloyd Loars there is. It's very loud mandolin, and all of my mandolins have been very loud. Surprise, surprise. But anyway, what I do then is after I get it to this shape and my starting thickness for carving, the starting thickness is important because that sets the dome. That sets how much arch is going to be in the top. I read many years ago, I went down to the St. Louis Public Library and went in, and I got to be friends with the librarians down there because I was down there every day on my lunch hour. And they let me go in the back room and read the manuscripts that most people don't get to see. And I was reading about Stradivari and things that he learned. And one of the things I remember reading very distinctly was, back in the age of not having any sound amplification, they had to make their instruments very loud. And he learned that carving a lower arch in your instrument increases the volume, as opposed to a higher arched instrument. So that's why we take this down to a certain arch, and this is what sets the arch, is the thickness of this. And so now we will carve everything down and away. One more thing I want to say about my instruments that I'm building, and please don't take this as a brag or as a thumbs down to somebody else, because it's not. It's just a fact. It's just the way it is. It's just a matter of fact, okay? So please don't read anything into it. Don't read between the lines. That's not what this is about. I'm just wanting to point out a couple of things that are probably different on my instruments. One of them is, when I say they're handmade, I truly do mean they're completely handmade. Now that is different than a lot of folks that are calling them handmade these days. Again, I'm not knocking what they're doing, because it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not how I'm doing it. And I just want to point out the difference. Often handmade these days means that they put it on a CNC machine, and the CNC machine gets it real close. Then they finish it by hand. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how they do it. That's not how I do it. Maybe if I had a $100,000 CNC machine, I'd do it that way. But I don't. So in effect, what I'm going to do is take a machine and I'm going to cut this outer edge down to roughly 1/4 of an inch. Basically about the thickness of your binding that you would put around your edge of your mandolin. And all I do that for is because that gives me 2 points of reference. That gives me a thickness around this edge, it gives me a thickness in the middle, and now I do all of the hand sculpting by hand, and I do it completely by hand, and I do it all with this right here. It's a little tiny finger plane. Now I have bigger finger planes. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and just show them to you if I can find them here real quick. This one's not together. But I have 3 of them. So I've got the little tiny one, I have the middle sized one here, which is, like I said, not together, and then I have the big one. I almost don't use this big one. I mean, I just don't hardly use it. It's harder to push. The little one here, people have asked how many millimeters or how big it is, and let's just look here. I've got the millimeters out here, and I'll tell you, the little one is, I'm going to call it a 10 millimeter. That's what I think it is. Yeah, it couldn't be an 8, it's a 10. So we're going to call that a 10 millimeter here. That's the small one. And then the middle size one, which I use a lot now, is a 12 millimeter. So I have, these 2 are the 2 that I use the most. If that helps you out any, the 10 and the 12 millimeter are the ones I like the best for carving. You can move a lot of wood with these little ones. The advantage, even though it's so tiny, the advantage is it doesn't take as much force to push it. The bigger one, you know, it's going to remove more wood, but it takes a lot more force to push it, and you're pushing a lot of times. So I do use the big one, you know, some. Like when I first maybe start dishing out the middle of the softwood here, I might use the big one quite a bit then, but for the most part, I like these 2 littler ones, and you can take a lot of wood off very quick with them. So the 10 millimeter and the 12 millimeter. So enough talking about that. That kind of gives you an idea of where we're headed. Literally everything I do on mine is by hand, except for just what you'll see in the video. You'll see the machining that I do. Otherwise, it's pretty much by hand. So here we go. That's looking pretty good. I think I'm probably still a little thick, so I'm going to check my thickness here and reset the router. Got the router adjusted where it's going to leave just a hair over 1/4 of an inch, and I think that's where I want it for right now. Okay, now I cannot use the same router setting on the top board because they were different starting thicknesses, so I'll have to double check the thickness that I want to leave around the edge on the... So we'll do the top board now and finish it up, take it down to the final. Well, as you can see, I did take a router and just knock the edge off of all of this, and that gives me a good starting point from here to here. And now I've got to make all the curves work out to come out even to that. And that's the same way with the back. I always start on the top, and for the simple reason is it's softer wood, it's easier to carve. It helps me build up the calluses in my fingers that I'm going to need to carve that really hard wood. Yes, I know there are much easier ways to do it. I could take machines and knock off a lot of this wood ahead of time. I know that. It's just not how I do it. There you go. Just that simple. I always start on the outside of the top and get the top outside shape to where I want it, and then I carve the inside to match the outside. So here we go. We're going to get started. I could have probably routed a lot more of this out right here, but it doesn't take long to knock it down with the plane, so I don't really worry about it. plane's pushing pretty good and cutting pretty good, but I am going to take a second and sharpen it.
It's 5 o'clock and one more working day is finally at an end. I hurry from my job and start the car and fight the traffic once again. Heading down the interstate, my tension eases as the traffic thins.
All I'm trying to do at this point is get some symmetry and get it down to where I've done the routing. I'm using the 12 millimeter plane just to hog it out. I took a little extra time and resharpened the 12 millimeter plane again to make sure it was absolutely razor sharp. Now it's just gliding through the wood.
I drive around the back and park my car, then I open up the door.
Doesn't take long to make a lot of shavings. Now I am, sure that this is looking easier than it is. I've been doing this for years, and I use these little finger planes all the time in carving things on different instruments for repairs and all kinds of things. So I'm very adept to using this and doing it quickly. Your results might vary. Most people, when they first pick these up, they can't even get them to cut. So it just takes time and getting used to it. The 80-20 rule applies here too. You can take 80% of this off fast. That last 20% really takes a long time. Because that's where all the precision is.
My life crown, my kids and my wife crown. She hands me my coffee, and the kids gather round me. It makes me so proud to be in with the in crowd. About our wedding day. Only say that you'll be mine, and in our home we'll happy be. Down beside where the waters flow, down by the banks of the Ohio.
Well, if you followed that fast forward video all the way through, which I'm sure I will be fast forwarding it, then you saw me remove 80% of the outside wood in literally 20% of the time. Now we have to remove the 20% of the outside wood here on the top, and that's going to take 80% of the time. And I'm not kidding. That's where all the work starts. I've got it roughed out, and that's what I call this. Now, even roughed out, it's almost as good as some mandolins I've seen. I'm not bragging. It's very rough, don't get me wrong. But I mean, the shape of it and everything is pretty good. I haven't measured anything yet because I don't need to yet. Now I'm going to start really putting a critical eye to it, and I'm going to contour it, and I'm going to, come down, and I'm going to flare back up at the edges here, and all that kind of thing. And I'm going to work a little bit more detailed on the scroll up here, and you can see that it's starting to already take shape. It's very rough. Everything's very rough. I've still left it good and flat right here in this very dead center, and I do that on purpose because that way I can make sure my thickness is still about right, and that's the last thing that disappears is that little flat spot, and it just gradually disappears. I just take ever so slightly amount off of there until it's just a perfect dome, and it just takes time. I mean, you can see here that on the table, if you look, it doesn't take very long to make quite a pile of shavings. I've been carving on it less than an hour, and made this pile of shavings. And I would say 50 minutes. And that's just all by hand, and all with these two little planes, the 10 millimeter and the 12 millimeter. Okay, so now we're going to clean this off a place here and get serious about making this thing nice. Friends, I interrupt this video to open this. It says it's coming from, right there it says it's coming from Shabby Chic Guitars LLC in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, I don't recall ordering anything from there, but I have a suspicion what this might be because someone said they were going to send me something, and so maybe that's what this is. We'll check it out. Now, that Shabby Chic, that chic is spelled C-H-I-C, so that could be shabby chick, which doesn't have the same connotation if you ask me, so it's probably chic. Aha! I do know what it is. Isn't that something? Someone sent me a drive belt for my sander. From my video, they saw that I didn't have a drive belt, and they sent me an email, said they were going to get me one and send it to me. As a matter of fact, it came from Stephen, the father, Stephen was the father, Preston age 6, and Clark age 3. And they may be out on the East Coast. I'm not really sure what state they're from. I would assume North Carolina, since that's where this is from. But let's go put this on the machine right now. It's been quite a while since I've had a belt on here. The banks of the Ohio. One of the obvious main advantages of having this feed is, it pushes the wood through there for you. But one of the real neat things is that you can push little pieces through real easy with this. Where without it, they're very difficult to feed through there. So let's try that, see how it works. We'll feed it through kind of slow. I'm just going to turn on, it's going to get loud. So I just want to say a great big thank you to Stephen, Preston, and Clark for the wonderful gift. It is sure going to be nice not having to push that stuff through there by hand now. It's automatic. It just goes through on its own. It's so nice. I didn't realize how much I was missing that. And I'll bet that was those boys' ideas to get that for me. So thank you very much, Preston and Clark. Thanks for watching my videos, young men. It's pretty sad when, you spend $50 for this little board right here, and 80% of it goes in the trash. And the same way when you spend $200 for this board right here, and 80% of it goes in the trash. People often ask me, well, how much does it cost you to actually build a mandolin? And I say, I actually do, and believe it or not, I spend more than $1,500 per instrument out of my pocket, literally, money going out of here to build these. This was over 200 bucks. This was 50 bucks. And the tuning keys are $520. The case is a couple $100. It doesn't take long. You're well over $1,500, trust me. You know, all the different little, you know, the tailpiece is 175 or more. So, I mean, it just doesn't take long. It adds up really quick. So, you know, people are always saying, well, man, you're too high on your instruments. You know, well, it takes me 100 and 120 hours to build one. I'm spending $1,500 out of my pocket. You know, figure it out. It just isn't cheap. I'm sorry. I wish I could do it cheaper, but I can't. It just is what it is. Now we're going to deal with this detail work here. You know, this is all by eye, feel, handwork. You know, I slow down some. I'll still be fast here for a little while because there's still quite a bit of wood to remove. But I'm starting to get more picky now. Where before I was just plowing the wood off. Now I'm plowing a lot of wood off, but I'm trying to be very symmetrical about it.
I was a roamer, a legend on sea. Tell the good dogs love made a new man out of me. Life had no meaning, it was all incomplete.
I've drawn the line on here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this off now. It's starting to get close to the final shape, but I mean, we're still a long ways off in a way, but I want to go ahead and get that off so I get the better feel of what I'm doing here.
Instead of roaming, I go home in the evening and she's waiting there. And I know that no matter what happens, she'll always...
We're still a long ways from being at the final, but what I like to do is I set this on that little flat spot and I look across and see how symmetrical I am, and it looks amazingly symmetrical right now. I'm kind of amazed, and we're pretty symmetrical this way, although this one is a longer slope, but I just like to see that the slope is a gradual slope, that there's no hills or things going on there. It looks pretty good. I also take my hands and I rub them around like this, and I feel, you know, humps and bumps and valleys and things, and you know, I'm getting close here. It's still a ways to go, but you know, you got to keep it close the whole time, otherwise you get it out of sync and it just doesn't look right. I might add that I try to vary which way I'm going with this too. I'll cut across the grain after I'll cut one way, and then I'll cut across what I just cut, so that I don't dig any deep ditches. You know, this levels it off. I made my thickness caliper here. Of course, I used a dial caliper and then just cut out a frame and stuck it in there. And I just want to see where I'm at on thickness. I'm only about 20 thousandths or so extra thick right here, so that's not bad. We're pretty close. So we're just going to keep working at it, and by the time that disappears, we'll be right at the right height.
Shines above. I'm a man with a dream and a good woman's love.
Call that good for the moment on the roughing stage. Now I'm going to get the tooth blade in here, and I'm going to level everything. I'm going to use a tooth blade to level it all down and get rid of all these gouges and things from the roughing. That will get me really close And then I'll use a scraper on it to get it really smooth. And I'm just feeling little nicks here and there that I'm trying to get rid of. I have the toothed blade in the plane there. I think you might be able to see the teeth. And now we're just going to go in all kinds of directions, just kind of leveling off what we've done. This doesn't dig in too much, though you can cut with it and dig with it, but if you just press lightly, it will cut across all the different grooves and level it out, and it's just a leveling plane is the best way to say it. Of course, it leaves scratches like crazy, but that's okay. You're just leveling out, and then we'll get rid of the scratches a different way.
In anguish and torment, I cursed as the nights went from darkness till dawn's golden light. I thought of just taking these two hands and breaking that body I'm making touch. I find while I'm waiting, there's no time for hating while anticipating the woman I wanted so much. How about the fiddle?
I'm roughly another hour or more into the fine detail carving here, and it's really feeling good. I don't feel any abnormalities. It just feels nice and smooth, and we've got a nice slope everywhere. I don't know how well that's going to show up in the camera, but I can see the lines going across the screen again, which is an indication that it's breaking up the video. But anyway, it's really feeling good, looking good. It's pretty level, pretty smooth. I never get satisfied with this. So even if I would start carving the inside, I will come back to the outside and carve it as I'm working on the inside, because I'll feel things, and so it's kind of a almost never-ending process until it ends. To the very end, I just keep working on it. So, but it's pretty close. I got to tell you, I don't think it needs a lot of work right now. I'm working on dishing the low area here. Just working on channeling that around there a little bit. If you were to put a marble on there, it should probably roll around there, probably even right now. I don't know that I'm quite good enough yet, but pretty close. Okay, we're going to do some close inspection now. Most of the flat area is gone up here now. Well, it looks really symmetrical. Golly, it really looks good. Not bragging, I just don't think you could carve it any better really with a machine. It's really nice. It's really smooth. It's really nicely domed. There's still a little bigger flat area there than we need, but we'll get rid of that. And a lot of that will go away when we scrape it, because we're just about ready to scrape the outside and call the outside good enough for now. Like I said, I'll never quit working on it, but there's a point where you decide, well, I think that's close enough so I can start carving the inside, and we're getting pretty close to that. Okay, I'm going to sharpen up a scraper, and we're going to scrape this all smooth and see what it looks like then. I guess I do pretty much everything the old school way. I take this scraper. This scraper has been sharpened many times. Here's one that's been sharpened a few times, and you can see how much bigger it is, and they used to be roughly the same size and shape, roughly. But anyway, it's much smaller. So what I do is I flatten the one side, just perfectly flat. And then I sharpen this other side, and since it's such a curve, it's very difficult to sharpen, and you just keep working it around in a circle. Try to keep the angle about the same all the time. And I watch the edge here to see if I'm getting that dark color right around this edge of the oil and the stone, and kind of tells me that I'm right on that edge. I like to get them absolutely razor sharp. If you can get them razor sharp where they will shave, then you've really got a good scraper. Okay, what I'm going to do now is try to curl this very sharp edge over without dulling the edge, and that gives you a hook blade that you can pull across this and really get your instrument smooth. I'm sorry, but the odds are you're not going to be able to see this as well as you should. I have a burnishing tool here. If you don't have a burnishing tool and you can get your hands on the a valve out of a car, a valve stem, the stem is chromed and it works really good also as a burnishing tool, and that's what I've used in the past. I always have visions of my hand sliding down here and cutting myself on this. It's very sharp, so I try to really take my time and make sure that I am going to be bending that edge over. And you try to do it in a consistent manner so that you don't leave a dent. You try to curl it over and you press really hard. Yeah, that has it curled over pretty good. So we'll try that and see how well that works. And now it left it with a little hooked edge. I doubt you can see that in the camera, but there is a little hook on this edge now. And I turn that hook down, and you know, and there'll be one place that it'll cut a lot better than others, and that's just the way it is. And so you try to find that sweet spot on your scraper, and then you just pull like this, and it pulls the wood right off and cleans it up, makes it really smooth.
Yes, I'm jealous, jealous. I think I'm losing my mind. I think about you, I begin to doubt you. I'm jealous all of the time. Jealousy goes through the window. Stay out of my foolish heart. If this is love, I don't need you.
Okay, it's up in pretty darn good shape. Very smooth, starting to look pretty good. Just going to look it over real close, and then we're probably going to start carving the inside. I've got my pattern for the neck block laid on here, and I just trace around the outside edge of it so I know where I want to leave it flat for sure. So that all will stay flat in there for sure. And here we've got our lining that comes around, and you know, this doesn't have to be exactly precise, but it's got to be close. And so we just go around that like that.
And I'm jealous, jealous. I think I'm losing my mind. I think about you, I begin to doubt you. I'm jealous all of the time. I'm jealous, jealous. I think I'm losing my mind.
In the past, I have relied on measurements to know about where the thickness should be. Like I would mark off inches in here, and this way I decided to just drill those marks on this pattern, and then I can just lay the pattern on here and then pencil it, and then I can check those key measurement areas and know whether I'm close or not. So that's what I'm going to do, is check these areas and see what it looks like. Time to knock out some of this extra in here. I do that with a curved chisel often, but it just takes a long time. It's much faster, and I've been doing it for years with a rotary cutter on the end of my Dremel tool, and it doesn't split the wood out. So to me, it's the best way to do it, and you can do a very accurate job, and in my opinion, you're still doing it by hand. So here we go. Do I think you absolutely have to carve that out? No. Why do I carve it out? It's just that much more weight out of the instrument. Makes it more light, more airy. It adds a little bit more air chamber. Not much, but a little bit more air chamber inside. And I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does do that. And anyway, I just do it. To me, lightening up the instrument as much as we can lighten it up and let it vibrate as much as we can is always a good thing. Just about right in there, so we're getting close now. Okay, we're going to I think I'm going to mark it again all over, measure it again, take all the measurements again, and we'll go from there. Well, I was hoping to go ahead and get it completely carved out yet today. It's about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I think I'm going to call it good. I think it's always good to walk away from something like this and come back to it, and you see things differently. It's just like when you're trying to edit something you've written. You'll just overlook it, but maybe the next day you think, wow, I can't believe I wrote that, or you see where you see your mistakes. And that's really what I'm talking about here is, I'll be able to critique it better tomorrow morning and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And we're getting close. I think we're still a little thick, but we're getting close. So in one day, we've come from this thick board, which was thick all the way around, flat, to a very carved, very lightweight board. And it's all done by hand. Just to give you an idea now, we were over 230 grams when we started. Let's see, we're 4.8 ounces and we're 136 grams. So we basically lost 100 grams. We've almost cut the weight in half. And now that was with the top carved already too, by the way. That wasn't the full thickness of the board. So with the top carved, just removing wood out of the inside, we've removed roughly 100 grams. So, and we will probably take off another 15 or 20 grams by the time we're done here. So it's going to be very light, very airy. Okay, we've let this set overnight, and this morning I'm just looking at it over real close. You know, you do things in a hurry, and so, you know, you can miss something, and I'm just really just eyeballing it. I'm holding it up to my eye, kind of like I'm holding it to your camera here, and I'm just looking it over, and I'm turning it around, and I'm checking all the different angles. I see that it's still just a hair flat right in here, so I am going to pull that down, and I think I'm going to do that with a scraper. We're not talking about a lot. Scraper literally just pulls off 1,000th here and 1,000th there, so the scraper is really taking a light touch. But I just want to make that look round. I don't want it to look flat. Really feels good. Just feels perfect. Okay, I'm gonna do one more. I don't think we're still down as far as we need to go, so I'm gonna put this on here, mark all the spots one more time, check all the thicknesses one more time. Off camera, I have spent at least an hour just going around, tweaking the thicknesses, feeling it with my hands, trying to feel anything that just feels slightly abnormal, even just the least little bit, and I'll look at it on the thickness there and check it out. And anyway, I've got it down where I think it's pretty darn close. I mean, within just a few thousandths of all my measurements. And it's got a really good note. I mean, it's clear. I'll tap it and I'll tell you when I quit hearing it. That long. So, I mean, it's really got a nice sustain. I don't feel anything abnormal anywhere now. I've checked it, the note on here, and usually I get one real obvious note that I know what it is for sure. I'll be honest with you on this one, I'm getting a B flat and I'm getting an E flat. And the B flat is most prevalent. I would say I get it 75% of the time, but about 25% of the time an E flat pops up on the tuner. So I'm not 100% sure. I can't swear to you what it is. I just know it's got a nice low sound, and I'm glad it's on a flat rather than a major chord. That keeps that sympathetic tone from, like, you know, having one string ringing out. Like if it was a D note, well then that D string is going to ring out like crazy. And you'll hear that on a lot of instruments. Here, as I'm talking, I'm feeling a little tiny spot just right in here that was just slightly, I mean, I'm talking just slightly high. And so I'm just knocking that down where it's smooth. And, you know, I keep doing that. I don't sand the inside at all. The old timers, you know, they claim it fills the pores of the wood. Well, then because of that, then I'm not going to sand the inside at all either. I don't know that it's 100% true. I think, yeah, to some degree it probably does, but this kind of wood, I don't think the pore structure fills very easily. So anyway, so out of tradition, I don't sand the inside at all. I just use a scraper. Then on the outside, I will use sandpaper, and I will get it really smooth, because the finish, if anything's going to seal the pores, the finish is going to seal it anyway. So I do use sandpaper on the outside. I don't see as it could make any difference at all. But I want it really smooth. It is really smooth. More than likely, you could finish it like this and it wouldn't look bad, but you would see some scraping marks. So I'm not most perfect scraper in the world. I do a pretty good job, but I do think it needs some sanding. It won't take much sanding, but some. And I really do think it's in good shape. I do think it's carved very thin. Let's see what it weighs now. It's probably not much difference than the last weigh-in because we've been just doing very minor amounts of removal. Okay, it's on grams. 128 grams. So that's a significant reduction from where we started. Let's see here. That would be 4.5 ounces is what it shows. Okay. There you go. So it's very light. So if you're trying to make one at home, you need to get it down to where it's pretty darn light. If you're not in that ballpark, I would say you're pretty thick. Now I'm just literally just rubbing it around, trying to see if I feel anything abnormal, because this is your kind of your last chance before you start putting the braces and the F-holes, because it's much harder to carve once you get that stuff in there. It just feels real good. I'm kind of paranoid about it, to be perfectly honest with you, so I'm going to go back through and check with the caliper one more time and just make sure I didn't miss something. Just in an effort to help out some of you folks that are wanting to build your own, I will tell you this one part of the secret here is that inside of the boundary here, which we kept this thick right around here for the binding more or less, but inside of that, if you want to call it the sweet area of the top, I will just tell you that there's no place in here on this one here, other than with the potential of right in this area here, there's no place on this top where it is more than 180 thousandths, if that helps you out. Sorry the air conditioner's running, but I'm ready to draw in where the braces go. I'm convinced that I have this top as close as any human can get it to my actual specs and measurements. So it sounds really good. It's really clear. It's got a real clear B flat note, and it sustains. So we're going to draw where the braces go inside of this, and what I have done is marked it on my pattern here where these braces end. And it's a very subtle difference, but the brace on the base side is slightly thicker than the base on the treble side. And that's where they go, and that's where they end, right here. And that's where they were on the lower. So I'm putting them in the exact same location. I'm at the bandsaw, got the piece of tone bar that I'm going to use, very straight grain. And what I've done is I've cut this so that it matches the grain, where there's almost no run out at all. I look down this and I can see that the grain follows this edge right here perfectly. And so therefore we're going to cut out the base tone bar first. Maybe you can see, I don't know if the camera will pick it up in this light, but the grain lines run right down this piece and they stay in the piece. They don't run out. You can sort of tell that by looking down the edge. You can see this is one grain line, this one long piece, and it sort of runs out, but not much, And same way on this side. It's pretty darn straight, and that's a perfect brace wood. We're at the thickness sander. We're going to take these both down. Starting with the thicker one, because we're going to keep working till thin. Okay, I have cut both of these braces down. I cut them down to a little more than 5/8 inch this way tall, and I'll just tell you that they're in the 1/4 inch range on the thickness and smaller. So we're going to put them in place. And what I did years ago was made this little block. I've been using this same one for I couldn't tell you how many years. And I just slide this in through here. It's just an ink pen, the inside of an ink pen. I slide it through the little hole and it's pretty tight. And I just let it protrude through there just a little bit. And I let that follow the contour of the inside of the top. It does a real nice job of following the top. I want to mark it in the right orientation too, that you know, I calling that the headstock, the front of the mandolin, so we put the arrow that way. Now we'll do the same thing on the treble bar. So we're going to go cut those out, and then we will spend a lot of time making them airtight, where I don't see any light coming through. After cutting off these tone bars, there's a little fuzz on the edge from the bandsaw, and I just take and go 45 to that with a little light file, and it knocks that fuzz right off. This is the treble bar, and goes in like so. Now, when I hold it up to the light on the treble side, I gotta be honest, I'm seeing quite a bit of light. On the bass bar, I've already held it up and I don't see much. Most of the light appears to be coming from this initial part of the cut right here. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to take it off with my little finger plane. I've got the tooth blade in there right now, but that'll be okay, I think. And it just takes a little bit. It doesn't take much. And we're going to see how that changed everything. That's pretty good. It could actually use a little bit more, I believe, in that same area. Check it a little, do a little bit at a time and check it. That's pretty close now. I don't see much light coming through it now. Okay, once you get them pretty close, then your work's about 1/3 of the way done. The bass bar is pretty close already. What I do now, because you're setting a square piece down on a that curves inward, I knock off this outer edge. This outer edge has to be knocked off to the leading edge, just a little bit. And I generally do that with my little finger plane. I will have to change bits though. I don't want to do that with this tooth blade, I don't believe. Okay, I have the bass bar in the proper orientation. In other words, I've got the arrow pointed forwards there. And like I said, this edge here needs to come off because it's making the brace go twisted. I want the brace to be perpendicular to the top. And so anyway, we're going to knock off this edge here. And we're just going to knock it off lightly, and we're trying to just knock off a little bit to bring it over to the other edge. I feel comfortable using the finger plane for this because, like I said, I use it all the time, and I'm very adept to feeling it and knowing where I'm cutting. Your results may vary. That actually did a pretty nice job. It's really pretty close. It's not too bad. I can see places where it's touching a little bit, so what I do is just mark that a little bit with the pencil there. And what I want to do is get it close by eye first. And close by eye just means that there's very little light coming through. And You can see places where it's touching when you look at it like this. And I see in that same spot it's still touching right here a little bit. You just take just a hair more off of that. And it looks like it's touching through this area here a little bit. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some carbon paper, lay on here, and I'm going to rub it like this. That'll put the high spots, mark the high spots on here, and then we take those off. I was fortunate enough to get a bunch of carbon paper from an office that closed many years ago. I won't say I have a lifetime supply, but I have quite a bit of it. So, all right, I'm going to try to put this as close as I can to where it belongs. And then I'm just going to try to hold the carbon paper and slide this ever so slightly. And you can see that it puts a mark in the high spot here and in the high spot here. You don't have to rub it much. Now there's more dark in more areas, which is what you should expect. That means it's touching in more places, which is what you want. Looks pretty good. Let's try it one more time, and then we'll see how much light's coming through. I don't see any light coming through it. So when you don't see any light coming through, that's good enough. All right, we're going to glue these in place, and then we'll carve them down to shape once they're set up. I'm going to get the glue on here and spread it on there real nice. I just take my finger on these and just make sure that the glue's giving it full coverage. And then I very carefully, this is the base bar, it's the thicker one, and it goes on the base side. And make sure I get it right on the mark. And I can see squeeze out coming all the way down the thing, so I know it's got a good, I know it's making good contact. And that's probably all we need to do, but I think I will, just because I can, put 2 more clamps in these 2 locations. You can see I put the extra 2 clamps there. I'm going to put 2 more down here. And I don't think these are absolutely necessary, but they're just good insurance that everything's making real good contact. And none of them are crazy tight. They're just snug. Now I feel 100% confident that that's absolutely perfect. It's just as good as it gets. I took the clamps off of this. It's been setting for over 3 hours, and I'm going to go ahead and whittle them down. And I'll be honest with you, on this I don't actually have any measurements on this. I just do it by eye, I do it by sound, I do it by feel. So this, I just carve them down to what I think looks good, sounds good, and yet is still strong enough to hold up the top. quite a few of them on this side that I think you can see them down through here. There's glue, so we're going to get rid of all of that. Okay, I'm marking out where the F-holes are going to be. I'm marking it on the underside of the top right now. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can put gauze in the area here, and we'll glue that down. And the reason I'm doing that is because that's the way it was done on the 24 lower that I took apart. The gauze acts like a stiffener in this area so that this, you know, like doesn't get broke. This wood is so thin in these areas here that, you know, it could crack and go right down one of these lines. Well, the gauze kind of stops that from happening. So that's what we're going to do, is glue that on there now. I've got 2 pieces of gauze cut that are bigger than these F-holes, and I will cover this area with glue. We'll lay the gauze down, and then we'll make sure that it's really adhered to it well. The gauze is set up overnight, and you know, it sticks out in places where we don't want it, and so I just take my little finger plane and I just trim it off, and it trims pretty easily. Actually, it's not a problem, and if you're careful, you won't gouge the wood. You can just get rid of the stuff. Now we'll draw the F-holes on the outside, and we will cut those out. All right, this is another tedious thing. You want to make sure you get it just right. Not close, but perfect. So I'm trying to make sure I got the same amount of reveal all the way around the pattern here. You know, I want it just right. It looks good right there. And there you have your F-holes there, and we will now drill through the bigger places, and we will take a coping saw and saw those out.